This this video is on solving one-step equations. The goal of solving an equation is to isolate, that means get by itself, the variable on one side. That says 1. Wow, my handwriting's awful on this thing. O-N-E. One side of the equal sign. That means your numbers will be on the other side. Your equation should end up looking like a equals 5 or x equals -2. This is what answers to equations should look like. Let's look at some equations. For instance, x plus 3 equals 5. Now, I'm pretty sure every single person that just wrote this down is like, that's easy, x is 2. Okay, I know you can do these in your head, but you have to learn how to do it algebraically so you can show your steps, because they're going to get harder as the year goes on. So basically, you want to get this x all by itself on one side of the equal sign. So you need to undo what's happening to it. Since a 3 is being added to it, you need to undo that by subtracting 3. Now, keep in mind, let me show you a little example over here. We all know this is true, right? 4 equals 4. That's a true statement. If I add 1 to the right-hand side of the equation, now it would say 4 equals 5. That's no longer true. 4 does not equal 5. But if I add 1 over here, now it would say 5 equals 5. So it's still true. Whatever you do to one side of an equation, you have to do to the other side. For instance, if I now multiply this side by 2, and then I simplify, 1 plus 4 is 5, and then on this side I would do parentheses first and get 5, times 2 would be 10, but 5 does not equal 10. But if I multiply this side by 2 also, now it would say 2 times 5 equals 5 times 2, which is true. 10 does equal 10. The whole point of this little exercise right here is to show you that as long as whatever you do to one side of an equation you do to the other side as well, it balances the equation. It's still a true statement. So I want to subtract 3 from the left-hand side. And by side I mean if you think about the equal sign as cutting it in half. There's a left-hand side of the equal sign and a right-hand side of the equal sign. If I subtract 3 from the left-hand side, I also have to subtract 3 from the right-hand side. And now I just simplify. So I didn't do anything to the x, so that just comes down. Positive 3 and negative 3 cancel out. It becomes 0. So we don't write 0 because that doesn't do anything. Bring down the equal sign. 5 minus 3 is 2. So that was a real simple one-step equation where something's being added to x. Sometimes something will be subtracted from x. And again, we want to get the x by itself, so we do the opposite. We're going to add 6 to both sides. Bring down the x. Negative 6 plus 6 cancels out. 10 plus 6 is 16. Okay, that's an example of 2 one-step equations. There's other types of one-step equations. Well, first of all, let's say some people like to write equations like this. And hopefully you can hear me in your head saying, no more double signs. We don't do double signs anymore. X plus negative 3 is the same as x minus 3. So you need to rewrite it using just one sign. So x minus 3 equals 7. So now we say, what's happening to the x? It has a 3 being subtracted, so now we need to add 3 to both sides. So x equals 10. Sometimes the number comes before the x, like this. You still want to get the x by itself, but now it has a 5 being added to it. The sign in front of the 5 that you can't see is a plus sign. So in order to move the 5 to the other side, we need to minus it. You always do the opposite of what's happening to the sign, to the x. So x would equal 3. That's all the ways you could see a plus or a minus. Now there's sometimes that something might be multiplied by x. Here the x is being multiplied by 3. How do you undo multiplication? You divide. We're going to divide both sides by 3. Sometimes that number might be negative, So again, what's happening to the x? It's being multiplied by -6. We want to undo multiplication by dividing. So x equals -2. What happens if x is being divided by something? X divided by 5 equals -2. Well, if x is being divided, we want to undo that operation, so we multiply by 5. And what happens when you multiply by 5 is that these 5's end up canceling out. Okay, so you're left with just x on that side. And then -2 times 5 is -10. Let's look at that again. X divided by 7 equals -3. X is being divided by 7, so we want to undo division, so we multiply. But if we multiply the left, we have to multiply the right. The 7's cancel out. X equals -21. That's pretty much it for two-step equations for the most part. I'm going to show you one more kind of hard type of two-step equation, and it requires remembering that when you multiply something by its reciprocal, remember reciprocal is just the flipped over fraction. Watch what happens when I multiply a number by its reciprocal. 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 3 is 12. It just equals 1. So if you think about 3/4 x equals 9, I want to get rid of this number in front of x. It's being multiplied by x. Well, to undo multiplication, we have to divide. If you recall, dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. I'd like you to write that in your notes. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. I'm going to prove it to you. Over here in red, we're going to do a little aside. We're going to do 10 divided by 1/2. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. What's the reciprocal of 1/2? 2/1. So I'm telling you that 10 divided by 1/2 is going to equal 20, because it's the same as multiplying by 2/1. So take a look at my calculator, just to prove it to you. I'm going to do 10 divided by 1/2. Notice it equals 20. We're multiplying by the reciprocal. So, with that said, I want to get rid of this 3/4. I want to make it go away. Well, I know that I want to divide by 3/4. But dividing by 3/4 is the same as multiplying by 4/3. So these are going to cancel out, and I'm just going to have x left over. And now, hopefully you remember that when you multiply by a fraction, this is really over 1, and you just multiply straight across. But let's review how to do it on the calculator. I want to do 9 times 4/3. So I'm going to do 9 times alpha y equals, to get my ND, 4/3. Enter. The answer is 12. X equals 12. That's it.